Now let's join Pastor Wayne R. Crozier in the sanctuary for today's message.
Well, I'm actually very excited about the guest that we have here this morning. This is the chief of the Charleston Police Department. So can we give Chief Brent Webster an abundant life welcome? One of the things, thank you. One of the things that I called the chief and I told the chief that I wanted to be proactive. I didn't want what had happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or in St. Paul, Minnesota. I didn't want that to happen here. And actually, we've had a very good relationship over the years, but what has happened is, and I understand that people who may have some inhibitions or some second thoughts about coming to church and not necessarily hearing a sermon. But one of the things that I really admired about Jesus is that Jesus dealt with current issues. If you notice in the Bible, there was a situation in the Bible where they bought a coin to Jesus. And they asked Jesus, because they were trying to trick him. They said, who should we pay taxes to? Should we pay our taxes or not? And Jesus said, show me the coin. He said, whose side is on the coin? Jesus said, render to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar. Jesus was saying, pay attention to what's going on with government. But he said, also render to God that which belongs to God. So we have an opportunity to delve with something that on the surface it may not seem like it's a church matter, but it really is. And we're going to show you a video clip, because from this clip, this is from the ESPYs and how athletes are dealing with this issue. And I want you to check out this clip, then we will start our interview.
Tonight is a celebration of sports, celebrating our accomplishments and our victories. But in this moment of celebration, we ask to start the show tonight this way. The four of us talking to our fellow athletes with the country watching, because we cannot ignore the realities of the current state of America. The events of the past week have put a spotlight on the injustice, distrust, and anger that plague so many of us. The system is broken. The problems are not new. The violence is not new. And the racial divide definitely is not new. But the urgency to create change is at an all-time high.
We stand here tonight accepting our role in uniting communities to be the change we need to see. We stand before you as fathers, sons, husbands, brothers, uncles, and in my case, as an African-American man and the nephew of a police officer who was one of the hundreds of thousands of great officers serving this country. But Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Gardner, Laquan McDonald, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile. This is also our reality. Generations ago, legends like Jesse Owens, Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali, John Carlos, and Tommy Smith, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, Billie Jean King, Arthur Ashe, and countless others. They set a model for what athletes should stand for. So we choose to follow in their footsteps.
The racial profiling has to stop. The shoot-to-kill mentality has to stop. Not seeing the value of black and brown bodies has to stop. But also the retaliation has to stop. The endless gun violence in places like Chicago, Dallas, not to mention Orlando, it has to stop. Enough. Enough is enough. Now, as athletes, it's on us to challenge each other to do even more than what we already do in our own communities. And the conversation cannot stop as our schedules get busy again. It won't always be convenient. It won't. It won't always be comfortable. But it is necessary.
We all feel helpless and frustrated by the violence. We do. But that's not acceptable. It's time to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, What are we doing to create change? It's not about being a role model. It's not about our responsibility to the tradition of activism. I know tonight we'll honor Muhammad Ali, the GOAT. But to do his legacy any justice, let's use this moment as a call to action for all professional athletes to educate ourselves, explore these issues, speak up, use our influence, and renounce all violence. And most importantly, go back to our communities, invest our time, our resources, help rebuild them, help strengthen them, help change them. We all have to do better. Thank you.
My thought process in inviting the chief here was one of the things LeBron James said. He said, we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what can I do? So that's what I did. I looked in the mirror and I asked myself, what could I do? And one of the things I figured I could do is that I could call the police chief and say, let's talk about it. Let's have some discussion. So one of the things, this might be a little curveball question to you, but one of the things I want to start out with is, because I want people to kind of know you, and I didn't tell you about this, but your sister actually was the council person when we first built this church. And you hear my wife saying yes, because your sister was an excellent council person. And I have noticed that as she has continued to rise, but we still mention her because when we would have community days, she would come by, bring her daughter, she would socialize. Every time that the circus came to town or whatever, she would always check, do you guys need tickets? Do you need anything? She was always proactive, very approachable. And I've watched some of her rulings, even as being a judge, how she seems to want to do the right thing. And that's one of the things I've noticed about you. It's like it seems like you are a compassionate person and you want to do the right thing. So to me, that goes back to your parenting. So could you tell us just a little bit about your parents and how you got to be the type of person you are?
I would say that I think the good and bad in all of us is because of our parents. And our parents are flawed. My mother's passed away, and my dad's still alive, but Carrie and I were raised very, very well, and in the sense of if you knew my mom at all, we're not from here originally, but very compassionate person, and very fair woman, and she passed that, and one of my dad did as well, and so these things come easy for Carrie and I both, and you get me a little emotional thinking about it because she did pass a couple years ago. My mom did, but Carrie. And I think that goes into the culture of the police department a little bit in the sense that I'm not a racist. I'm not flawed. I mean, I'm flawed, but the police department is not perfect. But if the police chief, if the culture starts with the police chief, and and to give the mayor some credit, when he appointed me, if you go back in the archives, you'd find he said that he wanted a culture change. He wanted a culture change, and so he saw some good in me. But I have great people, as you know. I have great people to do all the work out here. But the culture does start, and I think most people know me at all. If everybody in here has a story to tell, I know that, and there's been grievances, and there's been things that we've not done perfectly or even well at times. But you can ask anybody in the police department in the last 11 and a half years since I've been the chief. I'm not going to tolerate discrimination. I'm not going to tolerate sadistic behavior, and I'm not going to tolerate dishonesty. And and those three, we're forgiving in other ways. You can be late for work. We're not going to fire you. We're not. You can have a small fender bender. We're not going to fire you. But that's part of being structured and disciplined. And so, but I believe the culture. Although again, there's grievances. I know that. But I would say before we get into other questions that. One thing, I think that was Dwayne Wade that said up there. I think it was, and Dwayne said, the shoot to kill has to stop. Mm-hmm. Now, let's knock on wood here in Charleston. We're not having those events. Right. I'm not saying that someone hasn't had a negative, situation with the police, but we don't have that, and we take about 65,000 calls a year and about 15,000 traffic stops, and there's probably another 20 to 30 just interactions where. Maybe it's me saying hello to you, passing you in the street. So percentage-wise, I mean, we really, when we break those down, You know, and so as we get into the questions, I'd want to keep two things in mind because it's safety, and I want to talk about safety for your folks, the police officers too, and then continuing relationships because improving. Because they are good here. They're good here. They can greatly be improved. But as we move forward, let's think of those because I know one question's coming up is keeping people safe.
Right.
So thank you for noticing my sister and my family, and
Okay,
I appreciate that.
Cool. So let's delve right into it. And I did when I called the chief, I had my questions ready. So when I called him, when he returned my call, I was already ready because I told him this is not going to be an ambush. I wanted him to know this is what I want to ask because this is what I'm concerned about. And so the first question I want to ask is, what is the police department doing to make sure that the situation that happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and St. Paul, Minnesota, which really heightened a lot of racial tension and a lot of venom and animus, what is the Charleston Police Department doing to try to prevent that from happening here?
Well, the biggest thing we do is the training. I mean, training gets talked about in all of our professions, but training is something. We have a training division commander, we have a training division center, and so we have a training division budget, and so we're constantly trying to train and get in front of things. In May of this year, just 2 months ago, we put all of our officers through basically it was de-escalation, and the officers have done de-escalation, but this time it was there's different ways to teach de-escalation, and this one was more about emotional awareness and situational awareness of the officer, because we wanted our officers to understand in the instruction is, you know, if you bring your personal problems to work, you know, and if you bring your personal biases to work, and we'd like to say that nobody has biases, but we have to, you know, if we know someone is a racist or if we know someone has biases, then we can take care of that. But anyhow, if you have personal problems at home, and we all do, but if you're fighting with your wife and kids, or if you can't pay your loan, you come to work, and how you deal with that traffic stop, how you deal with the citizen, you may already be a little amped up. You know, you may already be having a bad day, and so we can't have that. When you just can't, and you think if you went to the doctor, you don't want your doctor having a bad day. So that was a great class. It's one of many. I mean, we teach. There's so many different community relations classes, but de-escalation's big.
So let me ask you, so do you have, and if it's something I'm delving too deep, but is there maybe like counseling? Because there seems like some situations that the cop can go into, it would be traumatizing.
Yes.
And so the cop might need someone to talk to say, well, I did stumble upon a murder scene, and to see that body.
Right.
I'm having nightmares. I mean, things like that.
Absolutely. We have an employee assistance program, and then we have some self-referrals, and then we have some mandatory referrals. And there was a very tragic situation that many of you may know over on the west side where a young toddler was recently hit by a car, and that affected. A couple of officers reached out to me, and they wanted some assistance on that. And we've also, I'm very happy with this. In the last 2 months, we have a full-time chaplain, and he's an ordained minister, and of course,
I noticed you didn't call me for that position.
I will. You dance pretty good too. I saw that. But you know, and there's privilege. There's privilege, as you know, with the minister and people that he ministers to. And so that's a great point. And the officers the movies just do a terrible injustice to law enforcement, because it paints the officers as not having feelings and not having. And one of the best things, I think Pastor Crozier, when he talked about my upbringing, but when you have children yourself, right? I have 2 children, 14 and 12, and I was already a policeman for 7 or 8 years before I had children. But having children changes the way we see things. And I'd want to add one more thing to what we're doing. We do have body cameras coming, and I know that's been talked about in Charleston, but they are here, they're approved, they've been paid for. We need to have our vendor come in and teach us how to make sure we use those properly, and there's a lot of storage, server issues that we have to work out. But I really believe that in an effort to be transparent and because a lot of times I think there's maybe an interaction with the police, black or white, whoever, But maybe they come home and tell their folks, maybe they come to you. And you've called me before and said, hey, Brent, I need you to look into something. I'm not sure if this happened or not, but and let's face it, sometimes it's worse than reported. Sometimes it's better than reported or not as reported because perception gets involved. But I'm hoping the cameras, I think the cameras are going to change the bedside manner. I mean, I do think nationally the cameras have shown that it's going to help the police a lot more than hurt the police. I mean, that's anybody's ever done a ride-along with the police, people call and they say, wow, we don't realize how you all are treated. But if it changes the bedside manner of the officer, that's great too, and then it will collect evidence. So those are things that we're trying to do, and the officers, believe it or not, I think are pretty excited about those. I mean, anytime you give them more tools, it's one more thing you got to keep track of and all that, but I think they recognize what's going on too across the country, and one thing I'd want to point out, there's 800,000 police officers, and we're just 163 of those. And ultimately, those are the 163 that I have to first care about. I do care about the officers in Dallas. I do care about the officers in Louisiana and Baton Rouge and everywhere else, and I care about all those citizens too. But I try to learn from those events, but I also try not to be crippled by them because we are doing some things that, I mean, Ferguson, I know you all, Ferguson, there's a big culture. I understand. I don't like to get into other people's business without fully understanding, but the report showed a lot of things going on there that are not going on here. And so I'm encouraged, and I try to learn from those other events, and they're very challenging, but we're just trying to stay ahead of it the best we can.
Okay, so let's answer this for me. What can parents do to help prepare their children for encounters with police, not just here in Charleston,
Sure.
But let's just say the child is away in college and they get stopped on the highway. What can we start doing now to prepare our children so the encounter with the police doesn't turn ugly or deadly?
That's really the best question. That's the question that I want to focus on, and of course several others too. But the best thing, and I'm telling my 14-year-old, my 12-year-old this too, and so I think it applies to white America too, but I also know there's been additional challenges in the African-American community with the police, so I'm mindful of that. But we have to, there's a lot of young folks here. All the young folks sit in the back, don't they? That's I know it's all, not all of them, but the young folks, they like to sit in the back, I understand. But you really have to, let's don't confuse the word comply with respect. But the slogan we're trying to put out to people, we're going to probably try to do some sort of campaign, is comply now, complain later. Comply now, complain later. And so to the young folks, it could be anybody. But I'm telling my sons that as well, is that if it's a traffic stop, then just don't when the officer stops you, you can see him in your rearview mirror, I'm sure. Just kind of keep your hands on the steering wheel and let him or she approach you, and then maybe they ask for your driver's.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes.
Can we act out something?
Yeah.
Because I know in the African American community, maybe a lot of people have, but my cousins years ago actually taught me, this is how you do, this is how you act when you're stopped by the police. So what I would like to do, I would like to act like you and I are having a traffic stop. And I'm going to tell you what I was taught to do, and then I want you to correct me. Is that cool?
Yes,
all right,
sir.
so what I need you to do, I need you to take your seat and turn it that way. This is my SUV, okay?
All right.
So I'm driving right here, and you're going to come up on the rear, okay? So this is what my cousin.
I'm going to give him a ticket.
This is what my cousin taught me to do. Okay, so now first of all, what I was taught to do, now you're going to judge me later, but I was taught to let all the windows down so that the cop can see everybody that's in the car. Am I by myself? Do I have children in the car? Do I have my parents in the car? Are there 4 other or 3 other African American males in the car? Because I was taught that is going to determine how he approaches me. Also, I was taught this years ago. Another reason is to let all of my windows down, because a lot of times when they would stop us, they would call for backup. So it would be a whole lot of them on one guy. So you let the under windows down so that this cop over here can hear what I'm saying to this cop over here. So when I'm going to reach for something, this cop doesn't think he was going to get a gun when I was talking to this one right here, okay? So I have all of my windows down, and my hands are on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 when the cop comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm waiting on you to come.
Okay. Pastor Crozier, how are you, sir? How are you tonight, sir?
I'm good, officer. Can you tell me why did you stop me?
I stopped you because you were going 135 in a 35.
See, he's not going to be serious.
No, I'm very serious. You know that.
He's not going to be.
No, I am going to be very serious.
Okay.
Sir, I've stopped you because you were speeding in a zone of 50 and a 35, and what I would like for you to do is I need to see your driver's license, registration, and insurance. So you can go ahead and reach for that now.
So I can reach for my driver's license now?
Yeah, and I might ask in advance, do you have a weapon in the car? Is there a weapon in the car?
Yes, sir. I am licensed, but I do have I do have a gun, but I'm also licensed to carry that gun. The gun is in my box right here.
Box right here, okay.
Along with my license and registration.
Let's go ahead, since I have a partner in this situation, right? I'm going to have my partner reach in there. Please don't make any sudden movements. Let him just reach in and the console and grab the weapon, and we'll check that out, make sure it's legal, and ask for your permit. So the officer's going to do that, and then I'm now going to ask you for your registration and insurance.
So I can get my registration and insurance now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and get my insurance and everything. Here is the problem is I don't have my registration.
Okay.
But I do have my insurance.
Okay. I'll be right back. I'm going to run back to the car and check you out.
Okay.
So we're going to come, in this case, we're coming back. Everything checks out. Your registration might give you a warning on that. And that's one of those administrative offenses anyway in the city. As long as you can prove you have that, it wouldn't be a fine anyway. But your gun checks out. Your permit checks out. We're going to give your gun back, and we're going to give you.
I can take the gun out of your hand now.
No, I'm going to. We're going to put that back in your console for you, and then you're free to leave.
Am I free to go?
You're free to go.
I tell you what, I'm gonna let y'all drive off first, and then I'm gonna go.
Now I recognize that's probably doesn't go that way for all of you. I recognize that doesn't. And this is going to go to one of your questions later. Okay. You mentioned about guns, right?
Right.
The legislature, I guess I can't call it a legal injustice because they made it law, but they committed a social injustice when they allowed the weapons because it doesn't change it for the police. It's still a concern for the police. And I will tell you, that, the gun really raises the ante. It raises the ante. It really does. And so, but what I would say, though, in going back to that, and I was being serious, but comply the best you can. And that's why the de-escalation training, are there episodes where the officer can overreact? Yes, we know that. That's why I'm hopeful that the body cameras, and I'm hopeful that we already have in-car cameras, I'm hopeful those will all help.
So are things like tinted windows, are those a problem?
Tinted windows can be a problem, and quite frankly, there's no question when you put 4 males in the car with you, that's, when I was a real policeman out there doing stops, now I'm more of an administrator, stopping a car with multiple people is a problem, period. Okay. And it's, and so I'm going to call for backup. Maybe you can tell they're African, maybe not. Depends on when, dark, no lights, 2 in the morning. You don't know maybe who you're stopping. Tinted windows, you don't know. But I do know this, though, that if I saw multiple occupants, it could be 4 teenage girls. I'm going to ask for assistance to come over there. And so, but not just in the traffic stop. It could be a situation where there are 2 people talking, a police officer, and I just would say to you and really stress is that when I say comply now, this city's got a lot of media. The Charleston Gazette. We have an FBI office, we have the mayor's office, we have my office. We do get complaints anonymously. The goal here is survive. And I want the police to survive too, of course. So I want you to be able to go home And then, you know what? And if you think, you know what? I'm not sure they had a right to ask me to empty my pockets. I'm not sure they had a right to check me out there. And then make that phone call, because we can look into it. We can look into it. And so I want to say this, too, is that when I said comply now, complain later, an African-American friend of mine reached out to me. He said, well, that's easier said than done if there's not respect in the community for the police. And I said, yeah, I get that. I said, but please don't confuse the terms comply with respect, because they're entirely different. This first question is about getting your families home to you. And the police officers, you know, I want to add this too, is that I couldn't fully delve into what happened in Louisiana and Minnesota and try to catch up to what all was going on and trying to study those because of what happened in Dallas. And because I had to then run to every roll call, which I was proud to do, and talk to my guys, because now there's a heightened sense of alert, you know. And so I think what we're doing here, I think demonstrations, I think those kind of things can be great, but that retaliation thing, that just digs people in. That's terrible.
Well, praise the Lord, my brothers and my sisters. I really hope that you enjoyed that segment of the message that we were able to share with you. A great thing happened in a recent service. We were believing God to save over 120 kids in a 6-month period of time. We had one service, and over 120 kids gave their life to the Lord in that service. As I was meditating on that service, I began to think about you and said, what would happen if our listeners would send in their names of unsaved loved ones that they're believing to give their life to the Lord? We want to touch and agree with your loved ones. So why don't you send in a name to Abundant Life Ministries of someone you want us to agree with you to see give their life to the Lord. And we're going to touch and agree, and we're going to see them give their life to the Lord. I'm excited about what God is going to do for your life, because it really is time for you to start living the abundant life. God bless you, and I'll see you real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Living the Abundant Life with Pastor Wayne R. Crozier. We hope that you were blessed by today's message. If you would like a copy of this message on DVD or CD, you may contact us at 304-342-0058. Or you may go online at abundantlifewb.com. Or you may write to us at Abundant Life Ministries, P.O. Box 11040, Charleston, West Virginia, 25339. Jesus came that we might have life, and that we might have life abundantly. It is now time for you to start living the abundant life.
Abundant life.